Now for our land acknowledgement for Lexington, Kentucky. Indigenous peoples have lived on the land now called Kentucky for at least 12,000 years. Every community owes its existence and heritage to generations from around the world who contributed to their hopes, dreams, and stories to making the history that led to this moment. Indigenous peoples have always lived on the land that is now called Kentucky and continue to live here today. The place we now call Kentucky is primarily Shawnee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Osage land. A commonly cited claim many of us heard in history class growing up is that the region was merely a hunting ground. This claim is a myth, perpetuated at first by land speculators who wish to improve land sales, and still today to absolve settler colonists and their descendants from grappling with their history of land theft, genocide, and white supremacy. The continuation of this myth is harmful for all of us. Okay, thank you, and I'm turning it over to Kevin.
Hello. That's very loud. I'm sorry. Hello, Kevin. I use the he series of pronouns, and I am here to introduce our first distinguished speaker. Marianne is on her way, but I'd like to introduce Mary Louise Geiger first. Mary Louise Geiger, she, her, is a lighting designer whose work has appeared on Broadway, The Constant Wife, off-Broadway, and on regional theater stages. Quote, "My work runs the gamut from weird devised work pieces with Mabu Mines and Double Edge, for example, to regional theater plays and musicals, to opera and dance," she said. Geiger, who earned her MFA at the Yale School of Drama, serves on the faculty of the Department of Design for Stage and Film at Tisch. With that said, let's give a warm welcome to Mary Louise Geiger.
Well, I will say, I thought I was going second, so. Go ahead, Dale. I'm a lighting designer. I've been a theater person most of my life, actually, but ended up in lighting, which has made me very happy. I have some advice for young designers. First, wear sunscreen. Second, be curious. Third, work and play well with others. Develop a sense of humor. And, thank you, and keep making things. Whether, I think the thing that we all learned during the pandemic is that we just want to make things, do stuff, whether it's in the theater or not. And I started weaving and making bread, but like so many. And the other thing is do the weird art. And I'm going to quote Deirdre O'Connell, who won the Tony Award last spring as Best Actress for the play Dana H., which is a play by Lucas Nath, which is a transcription of his mother's abduction by a patient. And the entire piece is a tape of the mother talking, and Dee Dee lip-synced to the entire piece. And she was saying, if you have a choice between doing something kind of regular and then doing the weird art, referring to this play as being probably as weird as it was going to get, do the weird art. And so, Dale, I support that. And this is a piece by Double Edge called The Territories of the Bacchae. And Double Edge is a devised work company in western Massachusetts. They're based in Ashfield, Mass. I've been part of them. We started the company apparently 40 years ago, and it's been a long time. They eventually moved out. They started in Boston, and they eventually moved out to this farm in Ashfield. They have a large community engagement and a large engagement with the indigenous community throughout the Berkshires. But this piece, we started with a version of Euripides' The Bacchae called Rites, and this is another version of The Bacchae for our 40th anniversary. So it started, as you can see, with Pentheus's funeral pyre, And agave is basically remembering how we got to this point. So the piece travels throughout the farm. So there are a bunch of, there's aerial stuff happening in trees. There are people walking in water. There's a lot of singing. There's all kinds of things. And then we end up back in the barn where Semele is the person on the wing who is Dionysus' mother. We have some adventures in the barn, and then, go ahead, and next. And then we go back outside, and next. And we end up, Dionysus relights a fire, next, and we end up in a pond. And the next, and there's a lot of fire in the pond, and then the women eventually come out of the pond and take the audience back to a tent to celebrate the end of the show. I'm going to talk about a couple weird plays. So the next one is Mabumein's Dollhouse, which is directed by Lee Brewer and conceived by him as a version of Ibsen's Dollhouse, which utilized the text pretty directly. I think we did not cut any of it, actually. But it takes place, the setup, we did it at St. Anne's in Brooklyn originally, and the setup was an empty room, like a backstage theater look. It looks like we're walking into a kind of work-lit space. The entire piece was underscored by Edvard Grieg piano music. And as the music started, these red curtains came down and enclosed the audience inside what felt like a Victorian theater. So go ahead. And the play starts with Nora bringing back a dollhouse for the children. And the entire piece takes place within the dollhouse, basically. And the text is the same, but adventures are not necessarily as Ibsen describes them, but the conversations are all the same, but it's a little more liminal than that. And as you can see, the original actress who played the maid happened to be pregnant, and in fact delivered on our opening night. I know, but then the maid, we continued to do the piece for like 5 years, but the maid was pregnant the entire time. And Lee, who died a year or so ago, was famous for adding a dream ballet like at half hour. So I'd come in and he'd say, hey, Mel, we're going to put this thing in. And I'm like, we have to tech it, right? And he'd be like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And then we'd add it, and it would be things like this. Next. Eventually, it ends in a nightmare for Torvald, in which Nora is telling him that she's going to leave him. And because she did everything she could to try to take care of him when he was ill, including borrowing money illegally as a single woman, or as a woman, and unsigned. She forged her father's signature on this loan. And Torvald, as this is about to be found out, Torvald decides that he's, in fact, not going to support her. He'll allow her to stay in the house, but she'll have no relationship with the children, etc. And so that's why she decides to leave. But this last scene is sung, and it's an entire puppet opera. Go ahead. And eventually Nora gives him the information that she's finally leaving. She throws off her wig, she throws off her dress, and leaves in her underwear. Next. And we end up with Torvald back in bed, asleep, crying out for his wife, and kind of walking through the theater looking for her. And that's the end of the play. Next. Oh, this is a play called Witch, which is a Jen Silverman play, version of The Witch of Edmonton, which is hilarious and takes 8 people. So if anyone's looking for some kind of play of that sort, it's great. And we open with a kind of version of the witch that's a classic kind of crone figure, right? And a beautiful woman comes out and gives an initial speech. And the drop falls, kind of kabukis down, and as she's asking, what are we going to do now? Is the world going to be the same or not? And this was in September of 2021. It was a revision. I think the play was written in 2018 originally, but it was revised in that September. And it was all of us, it was our first playback after the pandemic. It's the first time we're working under whatever the new situation that none of us really know what's going to be was. So we did it with no 10 out of 12s. It's a 12-scene play with big transitions, and we got it done with 8-hour days, and everything was just fine. So it's been great to discover that last hour between 11 and 12 is in fact stupid, and we can work without it. So let's go. So yes, I applaud that too. What's happening is that Scratch, the devil, is coming to buy souls. So he's come to the village to try and buy souls. And he starts with the son of the Lord, Cuddy Banks, who wants to be a Morris dancer and not the son of the Lord, and is kind of closeted and is deeply in love with this guy Frank, who is taking his place in his father's heart. Next. And we have a bunch of different scenes with Scratch kind of on the edge of things talking to people. So we have a banquet in the hall, and everybody has agreed that if the devil will kill X person, then their life will be great. So the devil is supposed to be killing like half the people in the room, and it's not clear how this is going to turn out. Next. And meanwhile, the devil is spending all his time with Elizabeth, the witch, and they're having a conversation, and he's never experienced anything like this before. So they're just having a real conversation, and they're both really enjoying each other, and he doesn't really know what to do. Next. They're like outside by the stream having a great talk. And at some point he realizes that he would rather be with her, and he can't continue what it is he's doing. And we had an idea next that when Scratch goes to talk to his boss, whoever that might be, that perhaps hell was just either a dentist office or a kind of like visiting the DMV. So it was this incredibly flatly lit fluorescent light thing. And we were all a little, like many of us, I spent time watching The Good Place over the pandemic. And, I loved Sean, the guy who's in charge of The Bad Place. And does anyone remember the Bad Place theme song? 1877 Cars for Kids. And you're welcome. Now you'll sing it the rest of the night. So we wanted to kind of echo that notion when he's going to talk to his boss. So that was why the light changes from something relatively atmospheric to something completely flat and kind of green and dud. Next. Stephen Adler Gerges writes a lot of plays about marginalized people. And right now, Between Riverside and Crazy is his play that's on Broadway right now. This play was called Halfway Bitches Go Straight to Heaven, which takes place in a halfway house on the Upper West Side that's about to be closed. And so this is a view of the main building. It takes place in 1 million locations, and everybody wanted to do it initially with a turntable, but of course it's at the Atlantic Theater, which is A, off-Broadway, B, too small to have a turntable, et cetera, et cetera. So we ended up staging it mostly in this one main room with a suggestion of the rest of the building and other little sections. Go ahead. So this is the beginning of the opening of the play is a therapy session where everybody is doing a little presentation about what they've been up to. And so we tried to have a slight party atmosphere by Christmas lights and stuff around the windows there for the party moments. Next. There are other scenes that take place in a bedroom that's a private space upstairs. So we were all watching through the wall, which we could see through the slats in the wall at those scenes. Next. Oh, there were also 1 million scenes on the street. So it's like 40 scenes or something like that. It's very busy. And in this moment, can we go back one? Sorry, my fault. In this moment, a woman and her daughter who have been living in the place, and the mother has early onset Alzheimer's and has really become more and more ill. And she has decided to give her daughter a gift, which is a pygmy goat, because the pygmy goats are clipping all of the grass underneath the George Washington Bridge a few blocks away. So she has kidnapped a pygmy goat, and doing shows with animals is exactly as W.C. Fields described it. And now I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was like, don't do shows with children and animals. But so the goat is coming on stage. The goat with a diaper, by the way, is coming on stage and about to be given to her daughter. And this is the conversation between the mother and daughter before she gives her the goat. Next. That's the conversation between the mother and the daughter. And go ahead. Okay, this is now another play. Dale Orlando Smith wrote a piece called Until the Flood, which is about Michael Brown's murder. It was commissioned by St. Louis, Repertory Theater of St. Louis, in the year after, in 2015 or something like that, time after. And it was about examining how people in the city were coping after that whole incident. And so it's 8 different characters, all played by the same actress, and then a 9th character, which is the poet speaking directly to us. So we have done this at the Berlin Festival, the Edinburgh Festival, Galway Festival, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Portland, Maine, and Portland, Oregon, in Seattle, around all over the country. And this is the last large production of it in the U.S., which was in Los Angeles right before the pandemic. This is a shot of the set at Worklight, so you can kind of see what the whole thing is. And then next. Here we are as we start. It starts with a recording of the 911 call, initially talking about why is this guy walking in the middle of the street, so that you can kind of hear exactly what that was, and then you hear different people's reactions to the whole thing. Go. One of the men, so in this case, Dale is playing a white man who is an electrician, who is the only overtly racist character in the play. I try not to editorialize about it, but at some point, Doug Ray is encouraging his young son to go hit another child, and so it does. There is a 4-minute cue that changes our perception of him as we're watching. Next. In the end of the play, there is a memorial scene. All of the stuff around the platform is memorial objects, which were inspired by the memorial that was set up for Michael Brown originally, which we had seen while we were doing workshops and researching the play. So it lights up, kind of moving around the space, and then the poet begins talking, which is Dale, giving us her point of view about the situation. Cuco. Oh. That really gave me away, didn't it? And then we end with it isolated on her as she's talking to us directly. Go ahead. And I have also done some normal plays, Hugo, which is, this is a play called Last Night and the Night Before, and if anyone is in Chicago, it's about to have its premiere in Chicago in the beginning of April in a different production with the same director. It's a Danette's Grays play about some young people who have had a child when they're 14 years old, and ultimately the question is who will mother the child. So they end up coming to Brooklyn to talk with their sister, with the original mother's sister. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hey, it's working. I'm Krista Franco, Vice Chair of the Design Technology Committee, and I am going to introduce you to Harlan Penn. Harlan D. Penn, him, is a scenic designer whose work has appeared off-Broadway, off-Broadway, on cable television, in regional theater, and in educational theater. He also has served as art director or assistant art director for film and TV productions for Netflix, ABC Disney, CBS, and others. Penn made his operatic design debut with the Lyric Opera of Chicago's world premiere production of Factotum hip-hop opera in January 2023. A Florida A&M University graduate, he earned an MFA in scenic design from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Penn is an assistant professor of scenic design at York College in Jamaica, Queens, New York. So please help me welcome Harlan Penn.
Good evening. Now, this presentation is somewhat interactive, so there will be times where I will say laugh, and please do. And now I will take off my glasses because I can't see. What was that? All right, here we go. So I'm going to do a little speech, and then we'll go through some slides. I'm not used to being on this side of the stage, so you got to bear with me. To the Executive Board of SETC, students, professors, staff, and family and friends, it is a pleasure to join you here at the 74th Annual SETC Convention. As I look around, I must say that I am having moments of nostalgia, seeing you young theater students full of energy and excitement ready to take on the world. For it was over 20 years ago I sat in those same chairs as a student designer to take the world by storm. This is indeed a full circle moment. Once I accepted the invitation to join you all here at SETC, I asked myself a couple questions. What advice can I give young career designers? The question lingered around in my head for several days, even weeks, and it finally hit me. Like 3 points in a minister's sermon, we're in the Bible Belt, so you're supposed to laugh. These 3 particular points came to mind. They are as follows. Number 1, as a young designer, discover what you are good at. Number 2, embrace technology. And number 3, when it's your time, it's your time. As a designer, I have always taken pride in my ability to draw and paint. Coming from a family with an artistic background, art was promoted and encouraged in my family home. As a young child, I found a liking and a passion for illustration. As a theater design major and fine arts minor at Florida A&M University, I took my first formal drawing and painting class. I was able to elevate those skills by taking scenic art and rendering classes at nearby Florida State, Roll Tide, Go Noles, and ultimately attending the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where I received my MFA in scenic design. I say all of this to say I have won over many directors with my sketches and renderings over the years. Sketching is a big part of my design process as I sculpt 3D space in my imagination. I will be honest, model making is not my strength. I can do it if it is specified in my contract, or if the director requests a model. However, model making is not my claim to fame. So, how does this relate to the common design student? Well, I will tell you. If you are good at creating multiple ways to move scenery or to make scenery turn around and disappear, consider designing musicals. If you're a lighting designer and you like music and color is a big part of your emotional psyche and the way you think, consider lighting for dance. As a theater design student, determine what sets you apart from other designers and develop those skills, but most importantly, develop your own style. Embracing technology. As I mentioned earlier, I love traditional drawing and painting. However, there came a point where I had to choose to move forward or remain in the Stone Ages. Although throughout my undergraduate and graduate matriculation, I did manage to take a Photoshop, AutoCAD, and Vectorworks class. However, I still stood strong against adapting to technology. The truth is, I was afraid to take that leap. I would examine draftings and designs done in CAD that were exceptional, to say the least, and those designs intimidated me. In addition, from the first time I started undergrad to the time I finished grad school, CAD technology progressed leaps and bounds. And this is just scenery. Lighting jumped to a whole new universe. That's a joke, too, because you're a lighting designer. Right? You get it, right? Universe, lighting board, right? Okay, I lost my spot. Okay, here we go. After finishing grad school in 2003 and primarily freelancing, in 2007, after I began teaching tech theater in New York City public schools, I finally bought a reliable laptop and got a bootleg copy of Vectorworks, and the rest is history. Sadly, I have not touched a drafting table in about 15 years, but I still do elaborate sketches from time to time. But I have totally given into the computer as a designer. It is a lot cheaper to hit send than to mail a tube of drafting across the country. And now I have a new fear: projections. Embrace technology. And last but not least, when it is your time, it's your time. As designers, we all set goals for ourselves, which is great. But remember, as a designer, you have your own path in the universe. Do not compare your success or their lack of to other designers. The same designers you're comparing yourself to now may not be working next year. Some early career designers peak too soon. If you start designing at a regional Lord A level right out of school, where can your career go? It is possible, don't get me wrong. However, it can be difficult to start out at the top and to stay at the top. You will reach Broadway when it's your time. You will get that production design or art direction gig when it's your time. In addition, as a young designer, make sure you find and develop a relationship with a mentor that can be a faculty member or a professional designer whose work you like. So please reach out to us. We will get back to you. It may take a while, but we will. In conclusion, enjoy your time matriculating through your various educational institutions. Develop friendships and network. When you get into the real world, pace yourself. Don't try to be a super designer. Build relationships with directors and production managers. Work as an assistant to a designer or work as an electrician or a scenic artist. Most importantly, find multiple ways to feed into your creativity. These efforts will pay off in the end. And last but not least, as you see, I am a designer of color. The George Floyd incident and COVID brought well-needed attention to race relations in this company. Many corporations and institutions have stepped up to the plate, and I can proudly say that the theater industry has done so as well. I am a first-hand witness as many companies have made a concerted effort to hire designers of color and members of the LGBT and trans community. For example, there are several BIPOC design lists floating around out there in cyberspace, and I have received several calls from being on that BIPOC list. As a BIPOC designer, that means a lot. Does that mean everything is perfect? No. But at least it's a start. And I will now jump to some images from shows. Oh. What happened? Oh, okay. You can go back to the very top. We'll just kind of... Oh, did I miss it? Oh, okay. Oh, was that going on while I was talking? Oh. Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. Okay, we'll talk about it. So I think here's some sketches I've done over the years. That is a production of Jitney. Actually, the director's in the audience from Kennesaw State University, Jacqueline Springfield. That's a production of Rent I did at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts in D.C. That's a production of Seven Guitars, which I've designed like 1,000 times. Next one, Fences, The Piano Lesson. That is, what show is that? Can you all guess? Roxy? Chicago. That was at the Forsberg Playhouse, where I met my colleague, Troy, in the front at Forsberg. He's at Texas Tech, right? He's at Texas Tech now, PhD student. That is, I entered a competition with some friends, and that is Falstaff set in Wakanda. So we didn't win, but it was fun doing the sketches. Oh, thank you. Here's some renderings. And that's from costume class. I'm not a costume designer. I hate fabric. Okay. Whenever I have sets and I get the drapers to do, I can't do all that swags. And I'm very much a Luan and one by person. Next sketch. Next rendering. That's the Tempest. That's the morning scene when they're on the boat. You go forward. That's the Piano Lesson again. That's the same Falstaff set in Wakanda, but actually painted and colored over it, watercolor. That is Brokeology I did in D.C. Here are some computer models. I've done Schoolgirls like 1,000,000 times too. That is the piece I just finished in DC, at the Lyric in Chicago, the Factotum. Another Schoolgirls computer model. You can just kind of flip through those. Here's some scenic art. I'm also a union scenic artist also as well. Yeah, just go. Some drafting. That actually, the top left, there's a new movie coming out called Big George Foreman. Did you guys hear about that? So I worked on that. It was called Heart of a Lion. And that happens a lot in the film industry. When they start out, it's one name, and by the time it gets to editing and all that stuff, it turns to something else. The bottom right one is Raising Canaan. Have you guys ever heard of that show? I was an assistant art director on both of those. And the cool thing about Heart of a Lion, or Big George Foreman, that was shot in Louisiana. I did all the drafting in New York. I would just send everything down to the art director. That's from Big George Foreman as well. That is from The Noel Diary. It's on Netflix. Has anyone seen that? It's on Netflix now. That was my first art director gig. Has anyone seen Fire Island? That was on, I think, Netflix as well. What was cool about that was Fire Island is an island off of Long Island, basically. And there are no cars allowed on Fire Island. So we had to recreate this club that's on the island on a soundstage in Brooklyn. So I had to go in, measure, take pictures, and all that stuff like that. And that's a computer model from the survey we did. That's a director's plan, and what that is what you usually would do in film. In location scouting is very big, and so you would have the art directors, assistant art directors, props, set dressing will go and visit the locations just to get a general sense, take measurements. And then about 2 weeks later, everyone comes back. You have a big tech scout. And so for the big tech scout, you create director plans. Because what happens is the cinematographer is there, the grips are there, the lighting people, and so they sit down as they go through this location, planning out where the cameras are going to go, where the lighting will go, stuff like that. And this one changed names too. I think the last name was the Greek Freak, the basketball player from Greece on Disney. So I worked on that. And what was cool about that was actually shot in Greece. And then they wanted to do pickups. Does anyone know what that means in film? Pickups? Yes. Right, so they wanted to do pickups. So they shipped all the furniture from Greece to New York. And we actually rebuilt, the main apartment that the story took place in, we actually recreated it on the soundstage in Brooklyn. It was Disney, so they have a lot of money to throw away. So, and here are just some production photos. You can kind of just flip through these. That stick fly ain't misbehaving, which that guy right there in the front was actually in. Troy, Texas Tech. Drumline, have you guys heard of Drumline? I designed that tour. Luchador, which our friend Ricky, who designed that, who works at Howard, Ricky Ramone. Oh, I'm sorry. He directed it, I'm sorry. At Adventure Theater in Maryland. That is for Color Girls in St. Louis. Roland Martin, who's a journalist, has a TV show, or actually a streaming show. And I designed that. Another Schoolgirls, I've designed Greece and Chicago again. Jitney, again, Miss Springfield's production. And the Factotum, I think that's it, right? That's the last one? Oh, and King Headley. And Mojo by, Mojo, Alice Childress. And one thing I would like to point out is, as a designer of color, most designers of color I know actually work a lot. We do get work, but the thing is that we end up designing the same thing over and over and over again. I've designed Raising the Sun 1 million times. I've designed The Wiz 1,000 times. I've designed August Wilson shows many times, which is good, don't get me wrong. But I think one of the things that designers of color, we want to design Steinberg, Ibsen, Chekhov, we have the same degree like everyone else, so I think that's kind of where the frustration as a designer of color comes in. That, we want to get into that mainstream and not just design during Black History Month. But I thank you all so much. Pleasure being here. And I believe I'm getting the thumbs up. That means my time is done. So thank you very much.
I probably could have said this from over there, but I just felt like I needed to come stand here too. All right, so for our final presenter, Marianne Custer is a longtime educator who has also been a working costume designer during all her years in academia. Her designs have appeared on Broadway, off-Broadway, regional theaters in the U.S., the national theaters of Germany and Hungary, and the city theaters of Istanbul, Turkey, and Avignon, France. She has done in-depth research into costume design behind the Iron Curtain, interviewing 38 costume designers in 7 Eastern European countries. Retired from academia, she now dedicates some of her skills to sculpture and craft. Marianne Custer.
Hi, it's good to see all of you here. thank you for being here. I used to be on that side. So in deciding what to show and to talk about at SCTC, I decided I needed a theme. And my theme for the things that I'm showing is that unlike television and film, most theaters are poor. And because they are poor, they don't have a lot of money for equity contracts, and they often don't have a lot of money for the clothes. So I am going to show you what approaches I have taken to dealing with this. So the first show is the Three Musketeers from Syracuse Stage, and the budget was fairly decent on it, but there was a cast of, I believe, 15 who had to play all of the characters, and had to have enough soldiers to have the sword fights. And so here are the Three Musketeers. They were virtually the only actors who didn't have to play more than one character. Next. And here they are as realized. And next, D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan in this production was very athletic and did a lot of acrobatics. And then on opening, well, the night before opening, he twisted his ankle, and I ended up having to build him new boots out of sneakers. Next, this is Milady and the villain of the piece, Rochefort. And this is the sketch for the Cardinal Richelieu and all the other characters he played. And sketching it this way ended up being quite useful in that when the actors came in for fittings, I could see exactly which pieces they all had to, that we had to put on that actor. So we could fit all of the characters in one fell swoop. And this is Rochefort, I believe, and Bonaparte, I think his name was. And again, so I sketched the main character, the one with the lines, actually, and then the other characters they played on the same sketch. So again, it was a convenience for doing very fast fittings. Same idea here. And in addition to all of the other characters that each of them played, they all had to do a fast change into these white garments. And so if they were playing 5 characters, they played a 6th one in the ball. Next. So this is a production called Alice, and it's actually based on Alice in Wonderland. The playwright, however, had a daughter who was turning 13, and she had an idea that she wanted to turn the story of Alice in Wonderland into a story of discovery from childhood into adolescence. One of the funny things about Alice in Wonderland, it's a story we all know. And the very peculiar thing about it is that there really is not a story there. And so when you do a play, of Alice in Wonderland, you kind of have to figure out what the story is. Is it, actually a story of, in this case, the progression from childhood to adolescence, or is it a series of, kind of magnificent events? So anyway, that's what this one is, and these are the character. So I have to tell you how the whole thing worked. There were about 7 or 8 actors in this production who had to play all the roles, and they started out in period clothes at a birthday party for Alice, who was turning 13. And they were all dressed in white. And then instantly they have to transform into the Dodo, the Lori, and the various other characters who cry, and everyone is in danger of drowning. So taking the period clothes, I added pieces that had to just go on instantaneously to make them appear to be a dodo or a lorry or a duck or an eaglet. I think we have the eaglet and the lorry here. Next. And here they are as they transform the first time. And next. This is the White Rabbit. He is one of the few characters who did not have to change costumes at all. And this, by the way, this production was at the Roundhouse Theater in Maryland. So this is the White Rabbit. The costume shop at the Roundhouse doesn't exist. The building that took place on site was either in the dressing room or in the laundry room. Much of this work was done by my students, and some of the painting was done, and a lot of the craft work was done. Actually, some of it by a person in this room. So this is the White Rabbit. Incidentally, you'll see a lot of coats in this, and basically the costumes were purchased and then altered to make them look like the characters. So the White Rabbit, for example, was wearing a white suit that we had painted and altered for proportion. Okay, now next. This Alice's sister turns into various characters, the cook and the dormouse. And I wanted to make her always recognizable as the sister throughout the production because she always wears glasses. She wore glasses in the period clothes, and she wears glasses as each of these characters, but different glasses. As you know, the dormouse always falls asleep. So in this production, at the tea party, whenever she started to nod off, the March Hare would wind her up again. This is the Mad Hatter, and there was I don't know how it came to me, but I just thought his hat should look like a series of ice cream scoops, and so that's what we did. And here's the sketch for the Mad Hatter, who also played a guard. These are the cards, the the Queen of Hearts, the King of Hearts, and the Knave. And as you can see, the Knave was Alice's sister. And these things were also made by some of my students. I gave them some leeway about how to build them, and the person who made the tabards chose to applique them, which he lived to regret. The crowns and hair were made of fun foam, and if you've ever worked with it, you know it's really hard to glue. So next. And here we have the White Rabbit and the Queen of Hearts, and the backs of the cards. There are characters who are fish and frogs, and so again, these were made out of suits that we could purchase, and then trying to figure out what kind of shoes a fish and a frog would wear, and things like Crocs and garden shoes work really well. And this is Alice, by the way. Okay, and I had a long struggle with the director to find out who the Griffin was. And, we had meetings where the scene designer literally had the director jump onto his back so he could show me his idea of what the Griffin would do. And finally, she said something really revealing, which was, I think he's her savior. And I thought, wow, that's great. He's her knight in shining armor. And he's also a lion and a bird. So this is what he became, the knight in shining armor with 10-foot wings. And here he is flying with Alice. So if the Griffin is the knight in shining armor, who is the what's that character? Anyway, the turtle character. I've forgotten its name now. So I decided he had to be, because they appear together, he had to be the, what did you say? Squire. Thank you. He had to be the squire. So he's wearing a tabard and a turtle shell, or tortoise shell. Yes, he's the tortoise. And it was partly cow and partly tortoise. Thank you, Emily. Next. And next. So this is the Bronte Cycle by John O'Keefe, and it was a play that was commissioned by the Clarence Brown Theater. And the playwright had spent a year living in the Bronte house in England. And he was really anxious to tell this story. And he wanted to tell the whole story. He wanted everything. He wanted meat grilling on the stove. He wanted the dog. He wanted every aspect of the Bronte's life on stage, including her death and the death of all the other sisters. And we had 7 actors originally, and the director, I think, blackmailed the producer finally to get an 8th actor, because they were playing 42 characters in the first 30 pages. So I thought, how do I do this? I can't just sketch a bunch of costumes. It just doesn't work. I have to figure out how going to transform these 8 actors time after time throughout this play and make it clear. So instead of doing traditional costume sketches, I started storyboarding it. And each of the sketches was about, I would say, 5 by 5 inches. And just everybody started out with something white. And seems like a theme, doesn't it? And then gradually things were added or changed or whatever to create the rest of the characters. So let's next. So 2 more sketches. Some of the characters appeared very briefly, and because they did, I would sometimes just give them a bonnet and something that would completely cover their faces, because the character we were interested in was the one on her knees who was being swatted. And all we needed to know about the other one was that they were swatting her. There were, as you know, one of the Brontes often worked as governesses. And there was a section in the play where I think it was Anne Bronte had to deal with some obstreperous children. And we had 7 adults playing these roles. And I was not going to make 2 of them dress up like little children and pretend to be naughty. So I decided I had to find another way to do it. And if any of you have seen bunraku, which is the Japanese form of puppetry where people in black operate large, sometimes even life-size puppets. So we created puppets that were operated by 2 of the actors in the show who played many other roles. And one of those actors is in the room. Okay, next. Again, I started out with, a simple, basic costume. If you were wearing a dress without a pinafore, it meant that you were grown up. If you're wearing a dress with a pinafore, it means you're a child. Next. And here are Anne Bronte and the Naughty Children. Next. And the mean teacher who spanked the girl. And, as I mentioned, there was a dog in the play, a mastiff. And as you can see, the set had a lot of kind of scribbling and drawing on it. The scene designer had come up with the brilliant idea, I think. The Brontes wrote all of their stories in little tiny books that, because they didn't want their parents to read the outrageous things they were writing, and so they wrote them small enough that their parents couldn't read them. And so the scene designer drew the house, the Bronte house, and the set in a little tiny drawing, and then he blew it up to be a big house that was drawn. And I thought, well, I think we'll have a drawing of a dog. And so the dog is made of reed spline and was operated by one of the actors who was also operating one of the other puppets. There were so many references to death in this play, and this was just one more of them. But again, because I wanted him to be completely mysterious, his complete face and everything was covered, but he just had this period shape that was kind of spooky. Okay, next. Am I out of time? Are we good? 5 minutes? Okay. So this is the one play that I'm showing you that everybody had it. There were how can I say it? There were lots of actors, and everybody had one costume. Well, a few of them had more than one, but it doesn't happen very often. But Salome was one of those, and this was at Playmakers Repertory, and the director wanted to see the play of Salome through an African lens. And so all of the costumes were kind of referenced through various communities in Africa. And I can't say that all of them were African costume, although some of them are. Some were characters like Nazarenes who, seen through an African prism, just have kind of details from African textiles. So this is the set, and you see Herod. The event was Herod's birthday party, and and for his birthday party, he wanted Salome to dance for him. And this is kind of a full stage view. Okay. These are sketches for Herod and Herodias, his wife. And I have to say, doing the research for this one was one of the most fun things ever. There are just amazingly wonderful photographers who have gone to Africa and photographed all of these communities in such magnificence. It's just a joy to see the work. So here we have Herodias, Herod, and Salome. There was a master of ceremonies at the party, and he is wearing a Hausa robe. Some Nazarenes. And here you can see the textiles that I used for them, that were these lovely African textiles. And again, there was an African dance in it, an African dancer. And, you know, we don't always agree with our director's choices, but we do what we're supposed to do. We can maybe discuss it with them at some points, but sometimes you just end up doing what you have to do. And to me, this African dance was so wonderful, so incredible. But it was not Salome doing it. And sadly, I hated the Dance of Seven Veils so much that I did not even bring a photograph. Because in this production, for some reason, the director thought it was appropriate for Salome to dance with a palace guard. And in a pas de deux. So anyway, next one. Some sketches of Salome. And here's Salome and Herodias. And some of the guards, these were Maasai warriors. And, best laid plans, too. I have a wonderful sketch someplace of Yochanan, who's, in the Bible, Yochanan wears like a goat skin or something. So I sketched this like tall, lovely man with long dreadlocks and just a skin covering the naughty bits. And then the actor showed up, and he had a brace on his knee and couldn't act without it. So we had to punt. His dreadlocks, he had dreadlocks, that was great, but they were very, very thin. So we actually had to make a dreadlock wig so that we used his dreadlocks but pulled fake dreadlocks through an elastic thing so he would have a kind of abundant set of dreads. And these are the guards. And this may be it. That's it? Okay. So.
Here we go.
Hi, my name's Alex Heater from University of Tennessee, Knoxville, costume design major. Graduate. I'm not a major anymore. I made it to the big leagues. My question is, I discovered my passion for theater very late in life. I didn't do anything in junior high or high school. I was familiar with theater, a lot of the great musicals of like classic Broadway, and my question for you is, what advice would you offer a person who feels like they're coming in late to the game, they don't know enough, that they don't know how to catch up?
There are TCG awards, and they can connect you, these awards can connect you with Broadway designers, and if you win one of these awards, they will fund you to work with designers in New York. I don't know if that sounds practical to you, but I'm not sure where when to make the applications, but I think that would be one place I would start. Do you know what TCG is? It's Theater Communications Group. And, look it up online. Do you want to, where do you want to work?
I think as a designer, I think we all want to try Broadway. We want to, I know I'm interested in film. I know I'm interested in stepping through the doors that are pertinent to me, and I'm a married man, so I also want to do what's right for me and my family. So I'm open to a lot of opportunities, but I think that if you were to say, hey, I got this magic bag, and whatever job you want is inside of it, just pick it out, I would probably say I want Broadway. I want to be able to say I designed on the greatest stages in America.
I'm not sure how to answer that. Do you have any ideas?
I don't know. All right, do you want a practical answer? I mean, some of the practical answer is that television and movies pay better. So, and there's not a way to say that that's not the case. But there is a ton of production happening all over the country. And there's Atlanta is a big production hub. I'm trying to think of places that are maybe less expensive than New York. No?
Yeah. I mean, that would be good. I mean, there are things happening in Richmond.
Oh, Richmond,
Yeah. there are things-
Marianne was saying? I'm trying to think where. Well, there's a variety of places all over, so it's way worth looking at that. But frankly, if you're particularly if you have kids and you're looking to support that, it's going to be a lot easier through television and film. And that doesn't mean you won't do theater. It just means that there are a lot of opportunities in that. And I would say for everybody right now, it's a very visual world. And I think that the theater is in the middle of kind of a reconsideration about what it's going to be. Although, it's been dying since Moliere's time, so it was always about to end, right? But between VR and The Mandalorian is all digital, except the costumes are real, I think. There are tons of production and lots of things that are about to open up for everybody, and I think it's worth really considering that our drama training in theater makes you very nimble and very able to apply your skills to a lot of different things. So I think it's an exciting time in that way.
And I'll also add that I dibble and dabble in film also. And the thing is about film, it does pay very well, but sometimes you're working chunks at a time. So, with the family, you have to really pre-plan because you'll be working, if you're doing episodic TV, you work half the year and then the other half the year you're not working, or you have to jump onto another gig. So it has a trade-off. Yes, the money is good, but it's not reliable. You're right.
Someone had a question over here.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. Thank you to all of you for being here, first of all. Thank you so much. This question is directed really at Marianne, but I'd be curious to hear what the two other distinguished designers have to say about it. Specifically about a career, an academic career and a professional career simultaneously. And how to stay relevant, how to keep a foot in both. Marianne, I saw your face go, well, that's what I did. So how'd you do it? Do you have any advice about how to keep your foot in both worlds?
Well, I have to say one thing, first of all, is that working where I worked, we didn't have any choice. You had to do it. And it was, it was part of the job. It was like publication.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to do it, or you could just lose your job. The other thing is, I think that the students help keep you relevant. The students keep you on your toes. They're not messing around. You get the right students, and they challenge you. And also, I was very proud of the program I worked in because I think we provided a kind of enrichment in our program that very few programs can afford to do. And, we didn't just keep them always at the drawing table. They were doing shows, and we were taking them to New York, which a lot of our students had never been to before. We were taking them to foreign countries, introducing them to a different kind of design and different kinds of designers. So it was, it was a program that was keeping us all relevant, I think.
And I will add that I know that a lot of universities, as far as getting tenure, they want you to go out and work. And what I did was I went to public school, which really set my career back about 12 years because although I was getting good money teaching in New York City, I couldn't go out and tech a show for two weeks or a week and a half. And so once I finally said enough is enough, I left public school and got back into designing. So, certainly where you go, the administration, that means a lot. And most of the time they want you to go out and work because it looks better on them. So it's certainly possible.
Well, and I've kind of done the same thing. I mean, I think we all have to solve the money question one way or another, right? Because I was freelancing in the theater for like 8 years after I graduated from Yale, and I worked all the time, but I was just not netting enough dough. So at a certain point, I was like, well, all right. And I have to do television or I have to do something.
You need a 401k.
I didn't need a 401k or another rent-paying adult. I don't know, but that part wasn't working out. So I ended up teaching adjunct, and I really liked it. So I applied for a job in Seattle, and I ended up getting it. And so I moved out there. The good part about that was in New York, I was doing a lot of small shows, which I always described as the show a week off Broadway plan. But you end up doing a gazillion shows, but they're all paying $12. So at a certain point, it kind of balances out, but the workload is too crazy, and you need to slow back, or else you don't have enough time to plan what you want to do. But moving to Seattle, that town at the time had 3 regional theaters, 2 of which produced in the summer. So it was fantastic because while I was out, I could do bigger shows on a bigger stage. And it's hard. It's just as hard ramping up your point of view in terms of level of production as it is ramping down to a tiny theater, So, and NYU also expected me to continue working. So it's a hard balance. The time question is a lot. And I don't have children, so it works out a little more easily for me. But
I don't know how many of you know of Jane Greenwood, who was a professor at Yale for many years and also a Broadway costume designer, a magnificent designer. I once asked her how many shows a year she did, and she said 16. That's that's more than one a month. Just think about that while she's also teaching at Yale.
But she was also working at home, like the shows were in town, so that's a little bit easier.
That's true.
It's less travel, but it's a tricky balance, but a worthwhile one because it does keep you relevant. The students will kind of hold your feet to the fire, and if you are teaching something that you don't do, they'll certainly be happy to call you on it. I'm glad to see Erin Mooney is nodding. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So it's good. Keeps you young, really.
I should mention another tricky little thing that made it possible for my colleagues and me to go out because, we were teaching both graduates and undergraduates. And that is we taught our graduate students as a team. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody had to be out for a text or something, there were people there in the classroom because there would be 3, 4 professors in the classroom with all the students in the program. So, every designer going off into his corner with his students doesn't necessarily make it easy for people to go out.
Hi, thank you all 3 for sharing your work and your lives with us. I'm Dana Moran Williams from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Good to see you again, ML.
Good to see you too, Dana.
So could you speak to how curiosity and empathy inform your work and collaboration? And the second part of that is you're all educators, which I appreciate. Can you teach that?
That's for Mom and Dad.
Yeah, that might be. I don't know.
I don't know exactly how to answer that, but because I'm not sure what the context is. But it seems to me that as artists, when we're looking at a play, it's our job to find that empathy. I don't know if you're talking about in personal relationships or if you're talking about with the characters in the play and with the event. Oh, in collaboration.
Well, I might start by saying every weird, interesting thing I know is from doing some play. So you can learn, it's probably a tiny amount about a lot of different things, but it does open your eyes to a lot of different facets of life, right? So I do think putting yourself into the play, into the mind of the characters or whatever, helps you be empathetic to a situation. And learning to work and play well with others. The thing that has been extra great, I think, about the last few years is that the notion of the director standing in the back yelling at everybody is really not cool. And it was never that much fun, and I'm super happy to see it gone. So the ability to have an open room where I can talk about the scenery, the set designer can talk about the sound designer can talk about the clothes, is a much more interesting way of working, I think, than the version where you have to stay in your lane. So I like it when it's like, we have this transition, people, what are we going to do now? So does that answer that a little bit?
Hello, my name is Chris Morer. I just want to, I guess a general question is, if there was ever a time that you felt discouraged in your craft, what were some things that kind of helped you kind of get out of that mindset? Just in general.
Well, I was doing like between 9 and 15 shows a year before the pandemic, which was a lot. Probably 9 to 12 most of the time. And I was tired. And I realized, I don't know, I was doing a show in Indianapolis, and I got some weird norovirus because there was a children's theater that was sharing a green room with us. And so I was going to fly back and teach on the Monday, and I found myself, lying on the floor of the bathroom saying, no one wants me on a plane right now. And I thought, so there were things I enjoyed about the pandemic in a weird way. Like, it made me have to slow down. It made me have to think through, how do I really want to work going forward? I don't know that I know the answer to that. But a circumstance changing our point of view and changing the situation is useful in a way. I don't mean that I'm happy the pandemic happened. I just thought, it's good to discover you're resilient. It's good to discover there's things you like to do that are not just the theater, and to find a way through all those things. Or go to a museum, or go to a museum.
I would say I found myself most discouraged when I was in public school. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I was suppressing my artistic side, in addition to having bad students. And it was just killing me. I mean, I was making decent money in New York City, public schools, but I wasn't designing. I would do a show here and there, but my creativity was totally shut out. Oh, there you are. I'm trying to find you. And finally, I had to make a decision. Am I going to go back? Or am I going to jump back out there? And I have a wife and 3 kids. And I told my wife, I'm not going back. And I said, we'll make it. And I started working as a scenic artist at first, working on TV shows, painting, and stuff like that. I eventually started doing some art directing. And then I went to Howard at one point. I was teaching there, so things did pick up, but I wasn't on that tight scholastic high school schedule. So now I'm able to go out and do shows, and I'm much more happier. So really, your happiness is the key. You can make all the money in the world and be miserable like I was.
I think I think a lot of costume designers experience this, that there are just never enough hours to get all the clothes done in the detail that you want. And at a certain point when, I had been up for 42 hours on one show, And it was just like one show after another where I was pulling all-nighters and then having, after 42 hours or something, go into a dress rehearsal. That's discouraging, and it shouldn't be that way. And in my opinion, it doesn't mean I should design more simply.
And one thing I'll add also is when you're designing shows on top of shows, that's a good thing, but is the quality worth it? So you have to really take a look at that. And, you're working in smaller theaters, smaller budgets. Yeah, you're cranking out 20 shows a month, but you don't want to put those shows in your portfolio because the time is not there, like as you mentioned, to really put that detail in. So again, is it really worth it? Should I just cut back to 3 shows a month? You have to really think about those things.
Hi, everyone. I'm a classical actor. Hello. This is the one place I get to be pretentious. Hey, this question is for my buddy Harlan Penn. You said something that I find terribly disturbing. You said that you are this trained theatrician, and yet you only do the same basically 5 shows over and over again, and you're ready to do Strindberg and Ibsen. That is an age-old problem for those of us specifically who are African American and are forced, if we want graduate training, to go to a PWI to get our graduate work. We get the classical training, the same training that our white counterparts get, but we don't have the same access and opportunities to work. So I had the pleasure of doing an all-African American production of Romeo and Juliet with classically trained black actors, and it was like life's blood. Could you speak to that, the importance of being able to exercise your craft on par with your white peers? And I have a not-so-hidden agenda. My question is coming from the place of what will it take to get those of us who are trained and who have a foundation from historically black colleges to stop going to PWIs, create the first historically black college with a Master's of Fine Arts degree in professional theater, and start training young black theatricians without the white gaze and or asking for permission in order to have their voices heard?
It's a big one. I think, I'm trying to word this correctly, I think in our community, we often look for validation.
Yes.
And I think that when we are able to design a Hedda Gabler or Beyond the Horizon, Cherry Orchard, it kind of reaffirms that, okay, I am good at this. And like you said, I think that's sad. As far as speaking to the HBCU with the MFA program, I think that's great. Because they have always been safe spaces for people of color. And not just black people, Hispanic people, Asian. I know Howard University, where I used to teach at, has a large Latino population in the theater program. So it's about creating those safe spaces and not having to deal with microaggressions. And a lot of times the microaggressions are not on purpose. It's just, we're different cultures. And so really finding that safe space is important, I think. And I think that's a great way to do that. I'm not sure if I answered your question. That was a lot. I'm not sure if I answered your question enough. There's a lot.
I would just say yes.
Okay.
But I would add, at the instead of a safe space, we need empowered spaces.
Right.
And irrespective of the intention of the microaggression, it is no less hurtful. And I believe that an empowered space would be a space where there are no microaggressions. And the people who are making the decisions about what you're doing and how good it is done or how well it is done look like you.
And I will say this, that as a designer of color, throughout my education, I've always been encouraged by white people. I hate to say that, but non-black people. My best professors, my first tech teacher in high school, Bruce Brown, who went to Michigan State, taught me everything I know about design. So it's really a slippery slope, when it comes to color and things of that nature. But, safe spaces are needed. They're needed.
Hi, this is more directed towards ML, but I would like to get your guys' opinion on it as you guys are trained in your own craft. ML, you mentioned talking about doing weird art. And with weird art, I suspect there's a bit of rule breaking. How do you get comfortable with doing weird art?
Well, what do you mean by rule breaking? Like,
well,
we have to have front light or...
when I mean by rule breaking, there's clearly,
thank you.
Clearly,
take it down a little bit. That would be great.
Clearly, there's design elements that each and every one of us follow, and it's more along the lines of, if it's weird, why not be weird with the design elements?
I think it gets to, in a way, Dana's question about collaboration, about how do you have an empathetic or a joint collaboration. And if you're really if you're really able to take apart a play or take apart a piece in a way or something that's working in a sort of liminal way, I think is going to lead you towards choices that are a little less straightforward necessarily. Like that dollhouse, I would never have thought, Lee's point about, I think I left this part out. The men were played by dwarf actors, and the women were, the publicity was always that the women were really tall, but they were sort of medium tall. It leads us to start to think about, he's using it as an example of small-mindedness about the patriarchy, but it leads us to other choices that are maybe less straightforward. Like the whole thing taking place in the kids' dollhouse. And it was all dollhouse-sized furniture, and the advantage to that is that Mark Povinelli, who was the guy who played Torvald, is really 3 feet tall, so it was very difficult for him to sit in regular-sized furniture, things like that. So it allowed the actors to be more comfortable, and it allowed the situation to be not so straightforward. With the stuff that Double Edge is doing, they're like putting an aerial thing in the middle of a speech or whatever. They're doing stuff that is really not linear or, sometimes it's also not clear, but but for the most part, it just becomes a sort of specialized thing, and what you do is start to see, this moment resonates in this way, it needs to connect to that, things like that. So I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, but...
No, that answers it really well.
Okay. You too?
I guess this is something I started thinking about as I was looking at the costume designs today. And I don't know if this really relates to what you're asking, but I think that when we're doing plays, when we're designing plays, we are interpreters of that play, And I think that each of us as a designer brings our aesthetic to it. But I think that in some cases you can bring too much of yourself to it, to the point that it obscures the play and becomes more about you than about the play. That may be another kind of art form, but that's how I react to some of those things.
Hi. I'd like to thank you guys for your presentations. They're super informative, really great work. So my name is Emmeline. I'm a scenic designer, currently working through my undergrad at Point Park University in Pittsburgh. As a young artist in theater, something that I really struggle with is perfectionism. We're constantly pumping out so many different designs, and there's not always the time to put all of the time and details that I want to into the work. Do you guys have any advice in how to negate that but still make something that's true to yourself?
More staff.
Wow. We've been thinking about this a lot at school because, there's 5 million classes and everybody wants more instruction in whatever. But we're reaching a point where everybody's in class all the time and there's no sort of dream time. So you need to have some time to kind of sit around and stare into space. And I'm not sure, I think we're in the midst of trying to figure out how to reorient ourselves so that we could find that. And I wonder if there's going to be some virtue out of the pandemic, if that's going to be the thing, that we could figure out how to do something in a less ridiculous manner. But I think you have to figure out what can I really, yes, it all sounds fun. Yes, I want to do all of it. And I don't know that I can do a good job on A if I am doing B and C at this moment. So I think I need to focus on A and let the other stuff go for a little bit. And I don't know, we're all crazy workaholics, so I don't know how to help the part about perfectionism except to recognize that at some point the thing is going to, as what a therapist said to me once, ML, everybody doesn't always have an opening night, but that is sort of useful. The idea that at a certain point you have to just stop. Like it doesn't matter. It's not done, but there you are. There was somebody back there, I think.
Hi. I want to just ask this question to all of you as designers. I mean, we all have that struggle, or as designers, of working with different directors, and they each have different viewpoints on designs. Some directors are very design-oriented, while others are a bit laid back. However, sometimes some of them can be very strong in their opinions, and some of these opinions may go against the design or the concept of a design. I was wondering how, as designers and with your experience, you've worked around that, and how would you have that conversation with the director of, I guess, figuring out a mid-path or middle ground to work towards your choice that is best for the design and best for the show, rather than veering toward what the director may want, I guess.
I guess the times that it's worked most successfully from my point of view is for me to come up with the idea first and sell the director. And that can work really well. It just can't work all the time.
I guess I have an ancillary point to that, which is that if we all start together, lighting, everybody feels like lighting designers should just be like we're going to provide the set and the play and you just take care of that when you show up at the end, right? But that's not, I don't find that interesting. So for me, if we all start together and we're all talking about the play together, then whether or not any ideas of mine are directly related to the set, I'm going to hear something like, oh, all of the lining of the suits is going to be chartreuse. And I'm like, oh, that makes me think maybe I should attack the transitions this way. You know what I mean? That are not it may not be a direct correlation, but it's going to trigger something if we're all talking. And so the thing I've found in the last few years is that we've gotten increasingly siloed away from that, and I think that's a problem. So I'm in the middle of working on a new musical right now. Is the timing great to be doing this at the second when I was trying to prepare for this and all of that? Not great. But the idea that I'm going to be participating in those meetings is really great. So no matter how much you can go, it's much better to show up for that part.
Yeah, and I've experienced so many shows where the director just wants to meet with the set designer. They want to work with the set designer, get the whole space worked out, and then they'll talk about costumes. And I guess the best thing you can try to do is persuade the director to talk to all of you at the same time. And some are very resistant to that. So, but you can do your best. It's easier than, coming later to the director and saying, I don't agree with you.
And also I would add, just make sure that you are able to support your vision and not just, talk a good game, but actually be able to concretely say, this is what I want and this is why. Because I've had both gamuts. I've had some directors that know exactly what they want, which is fine for me. That just shows me how I need to approach this show. And then I've had some directors, you show them a sketch and you might as well give them a plate of spaghetti. They can't, they don't get it. So you have to really just, look at the type of director you're working with and just prepare. And always remember that, as far as concept-wise, of course the director is the head, but don't ever give up on your vision, because there have been times where I've done a show, and it's something small. I did a production of Radio Golf. Was it Radio? I think it was Radio Golf, August Wilson. And the director was like, this is all good. I want some kind of barrier. Just, some kind of pole or railing. I said, okay, sure. And then it looked terrible in the design. It didn't hurt anything, but just visually I wasn't happy. And so that's a battle that I should have picked. And there's some that you just let go by the wayside because it's not worth it.
Hi, my name is Mitch Wilson from University of Tennessee. I'm a lighting student, or lighting graduate. My question for you guys is, how do you get your artistic vision or your style into any show that you work on? Because I know sometimes, it's hard to put your vision and your style on every piece of theater that you do. And so how do you find the fun moments on shows that you may not initially find interest in?
Well, I would say that your style naturally comes into your design. I would say, as a lighting designer, there's a type of front light that you like, or side light, or high sides, whatever. And so usually, your reflection shows up in your design some kind of way. So I don't think you really have to try so hard. I think it happens naturally. At least in my opinion.
I always want the shows to look different. So I want the shows to look like themselves. So I'm sure there are things that I do that somebody could point out and say, well, you did this, that, and the other thing like these 37 times. But I really try to not make them look the same. And I want it to be a response to whatever we Pluriel are doing at this moment, So you're going to do plays more than once. I remember hearing somebody say, my design for, I can't remember, Joe's play at the diner, is always this. And I was thinking, whoa, what? I did Wit 3 times in 9 months with the same actor twice, the same director twice, and never the same set designer. But the 3 productions were totally different. And that was, I considered that a big achievement, actually, because I want them to be of themselves. And there are a lot of ways to kind of get into that play or a play. And I don't want to be stuck with only one. It's great to be able to explore more points of view.
I think that as designers, we need to find richness of experience through travel, through reading, through looking at art, so that when this thing comes in front of you that maybe has been done for millennia, that suddenly, because of the richness of what you have brought into your experience, solutions come to you. And, brief example. I've been fascinated with turkey for a long time, not the animal. And I did a lot of reading about World War I and Gallipoli and Ataturk, who was the person who brought Turkey into the 20th century, that took the veil away from women and the fez away from men, and was such a popular leader that to this day you can't go into a barber shop without seeing Ataturk's photograph. And then I had to design a production of Oedipus Rex, and suddenly it all fell together, and I had a solution for Oedipus Rex, and it's been done by for as I said, for millennia, but how do we do it now? So anyway, that's my advice: richness of experience.
Hi, my name's Liam Donnelly. I'm a senior at Clemson University, about to graduate with a theater degree and want to work in lighting design. You guys have worked all over, and you are professors and have different jobs and have families. How do you remain flexible, especially whenever you consider traveling for different shows or working in new areas or something along those lines? Just remaining flexible enough in your career that you're able to do these different plays in these different places.
Well, I had originally wanted to be a director when I was graduating from high school. So I went to college with the plan of double majoring in drama and history, and that I was going to be a director. And then I had to take a tech class, a required design class, and I was like, oh, these are the same, this is the same conceiving of the whole world, and operating over time and thinking about audience experience. But I don't have to deal with the pesky actors. Not that they're not wonderful, but I realized I did not have good instincts about how to help them get better. But I had a lot of instincts about what it should look like, and apparently a shorter attention span. So you could, because I'm on a show for much less time than the directors are. So that's helpful in terms of wanting to move on to a new thing. I'm curious about a lot of things, so I can always find a way in to some new situation. I like traveling, which is very helpful. And I like seeing new places. And then what happens really is that you end up going back to some theaters. Like Marianne and I have done a show, have done, I think, more than one show at Playmakers, or at a variety of theaters. And you have like a little family in all of these places, which is great. And it allows you to relax in that space. And these are the things I like to do there. And these are the things I want to make sure I see in this new place. So it's the excitement of going somewhere new and working with a different group of people that seems fun. And most of the time we have fun jobs.
Yeah, it's true.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, let's give our guests a round of applause. On behalf of SETC, we want to thank you for your grace, your attention, your care, and your inspiring words and sharing part of who you are with us.